As a result, it is my view that if a Supreme Court justice resigns tomorrow or within the next several weeks, or resigns at the end of the summer, President Bush should consider following the practice of a majority of his predecessors and not name a nominee until after the November election is completed.
Well, that was then. More specifically, that was 1992. Joe Biden, a senator, and he sat on the Judiciary Committee, and he said that then President Bush shouldn't appoint a nominee during an election year. Now, that was a hypothetical, as there wasn't an opening on the high court. But Republicans, they're using what the now vice president had to say back then against the White House today as it tries to fill the open position on the high court vacated by the death of Antonin Scalia. Now, to today, Vice President railing against those same Republicans.
Weeks ago, my friends, and they are my friends, Republican senators, announced that whomever the nominee might be, they intended to abdicate their responsibility completely. That what they say today, what they said then, what Republican senators say they will do, in my view, can lead to a genuine constitutional crisis, born out of the dysfunction of Washington.
Now, this comes as another case appears to be headed for a 4-4 deadlock in the high court, since there is no potential tie-breaking vote, as you know. Okay, and I'll start with you, Bill, in that are Republicans right to say it's hypocrisy? You wanted something back in '92, and now, 24 years later, you want something different because it's a Democrat sitting in the White House.
I mean, I think the hypocrisy charge fits. But I think Joe Biden was wrong in 1992, and I think the Republicans are wrong in 2016. The Constitution, they could turn down the nominee, but they need to give him a hearing under the Constitution. And for my party, which likes to boast that it's rooted in the Constitution, to break so clearly with the Constitution, I think is a very bad play, and it's bad for the country.
And I could show a soundbite that we have of Mitch McConnell, who basically took the opposite view. I believe it was about 10 years ago. Which said you have to let us do an up and down vote. It's our responsibility.
George Will has a good piece today on that, by the way.
Exactly. Thank you. And I saw it. So we all agree that they should put at least give Merrick Garland a hearing, and they should at least give him up and down vote. But let's talk the politics of it. Richard, do you think if you're the Republicans right now, forget about the ethics, the right and the wrong, do you look at Garland and say, you know what, we're probably going to lose in November, and there's a good likelihood she's going to put a more progressive up there? This guy, he's tended to be with law enforcement on more cases than he hasn't, and when it relates to civil liberties and the rest. This is as good as we're going to do. Let's vote for this guy, or do they say, let's do the pretense, let's give him hearings, and then let's vote him down?
I think they should vote for who they think fits the needs of the country on the Supreme Court, and that's the constitutional responsibility. And I happen to think he should be confirmed. I think he's in a mold of confirmable justices. I think historically folks like him have been confirmed. But I don't think it does anybody any good to be too calculating. Remember what the calculus is. They're not looking at a national decision. They're looking at problems in particular states where if senators allow for an Obama nominee to be confirmed, they are likely to get a primary. That's the political calculus. It's a calculus that goes state by state. It's unacceptable.
No,
it's unacceptable.
And we agree. I think
it's politically.
I think Bill said it best. But it's funny. Richard's standard's actually different than what Justice Roberts has said, which is, and he actually spoke about recent confirmations to the High Court, including 2 progressive justices, where he said, no. The qualifications of the candidate, regardless of whatever their perceived leanings are, if they are an accomplished jurist in effect here, understand the laws, can apply the laws equally when important cases come before us, that should be the standard. And he defended his progressive colleagues, and he said there shouldn't be party line votes based off of what people believe. To Rich's point is, do they serve well the needs of the country? His was more, not even strict constructionist. Are they an excellent jurist And do they know and will they apply the law as it should be applied in their interpretation? What should be the standard for somebody getting either a vote yes or no?
Well, I understand Robert's point of view, and that's probably the classic model that the Senate has used through most of American history. But it hasn't really been the model lately. I mean, I think senators have felt that they ought to apply their own independent views and evaluate what kind of justice the nominee would be.
But you had Sotomayor, and you did see also Kagan. They got confirmed.
They did, but by much closer margins, as many people voted against them, not because of their credentials, but because of their perceived views. And the reality is, presidents are appointing Supreme Court justices because of their views to a greater degree than they did before. The predictability of how a Supreme Court justice will act on the court is greater than it used to be before. The Supreme Court, for better or worse, is becoming a political institution with the same recognizable partisan distinctions that we see in other branches of government. And when that's the case, I can't fault senators for applying that test, at least in part, to the choice that they make.
Okay, but Andrew, we've counted about 10 Republicans that could have some tough races on their hands in the Senate this fall.
That's seven.
Seven maybe?
At this point.
And they said if you stretch it, maybe there could be. Okay, let's round it to 8 for conversation. If you're that senator in Illinois right now, who's got a tough re-election fight ahead of him, and he probably is not going to be helped by the top of the ticket, certainly in Illinois, would Republicans be better served if they do the math and they say, all right, listen, we're not going to probably do better than Garland, so let's put him up. Let's let the guys in the red states vote no against him. There's enough guys, Republicans, whether you're in Maine or in Illinois, whatever, let them vote for him. It'll only help them in the general. And at the end of the day, we're better off than Hillary having an open seat and be able to put up some progressive.
Only if they confirm it. If they lose, if Garland loses, even if Kirk or some of these guys get to vote yes, the Democrats can effectively tag the Republicans.
I think, but to Richard's earlier point, we're not past primary season yet, and so I think that's the concern right now, is that the people in those hot seats are.
They're not going to be able to ramp somebody up to go against these guys. I mean,
opponents.
Yeah, most of them do. So I think you could see the threat of having the incumbent lose in one of these primaries. I think one of the things we're going to see during this current recess, when senators go home and start facing their voters, what kind of blowback they're getting there. And then once you get past primary season, you may see a large number of those 7 actually start to defect and say, okay, let's have hearings and let's push our way towards a vote.
Dom, give free advice here. Politically, we've seen what McConnell's already said. Grassley's kind of wavered on this thing a little bit. What would the free advice be to Republicans how to handle this thing between now and November?
Well, it depends if you're concerned greatly about the primaries. But what I would say is find a way to give a little. Now, that meaning that showing that you're doing the will of the people, that you're willing to go against what you said publicly because it's in the good of the country. Now, of course, they don't mean that, but it may help them politically. No, I mean, we're talking raw politics.
Yeah, I'm with you so far.
Raw
so
politics.
A vote or are hearings enough?
Hearings are enough. If you, because that would show we put the good of the country ahead of everything else.
If you talk about a Republican Party where Donald Trump's leading in the polls, so I don't think the Republican voters want what's for the good of the country. They want what's for the good of the Republican Party.
I agree with that.
I think there's enough Republicans, though, who said, help me out here. I don't need to, I got a tough enough fight on my hands. I don't need this one, too. All right, coming up next. Convicted of manslaughter for killing an unarmed man in a Brooklyn stairwell. Of course, I'm talking about then Officer Peter Liang of the NYPD. But it turns out, even after he buried his hands after hearing is found guilty, he may not see a day behind bars. The stunning development in the Akai Gurley case straight ahead.